everybody. Welcome to Dine with the Divine. I'm your host, Ashley, and together we'll be exploring the magical, the mystical, and everything in between. Today, we're going to talk about a little bit of puritanical magic. And this guy, I don't even know how to describe the story we're going to tell later. So I hope you're having a wonderful week. And if not, I hope it gets better soon. Today, we have an absolutely fantastic guest. We have Heather Freeman, who's the host of Magic in the United States. She's been fascinated by magic, witchcraft, religion, and spirituality since she was a child. And in 2020, she created the movie turned podcast series, Familiar Shapes, about the early modern English witch trials and bought on social media. Her podcast, Magic in the United States, she turns her sights towards her own home and time travel to explore some of America's most riveting and at times devastating stories of magic, spirituality, religion, and the occult. Heather, how are you?
Great. Thank you so much for having me, Ashley. This is I'm so excited.
Yay! I'm so excited. I'm so happy for you to be here. So, as I ask everybody, I know we read this in your bio. So, you've been fascinated by these subjects since you were a kid. When was the first time that you were like, what's going on here? Do you remember?
Yeah. I mean, if we go superhero origin stories on occultism kind of thing.
Yeah.
Cool. I'm there for that. Yeah. I mean, really, I grew up in New Jersey, in a kind of a suburb, but it was a farming community then. I know, right? Yeah. Where are you from in New Jersey? Are you in New Jersey now? I have no idea where you are.
Yes, I'm in New Jersey right now. I'm in central Jersey. I live in Mercer County.
Dude, no way. Okay. I grew up in Somerset County.
Stop. I work in Somerset County.
I worked in Mercer County. So there you go. This is 1,000 years ago, though. This is back when, before cell phones. Literally.
There is. Oh my God, that's amazing. Okay, cool. I'm sorry to interrupt. Okay, go ahead.
No, so you understand then. So I don't need to. So maybe your listeners don't understand, but you understand, Ashley, that the woods of New Jersey are spooky as all get out. Besides even the Jersey Devil.
Yeah.
There are things there. Right.
In the woods. It's just woods everywhere too. It's just everywhere. Right. Yeah.
No, and nobody knows it unless you grow up there and you're just oh, okay, this is normal. So yeah, I used to just hang out in the woods all day long. And this is the 70s and the 80s. And I had some of my first sort of experiences feeling deeply connected to that land, to the history of that land, to the animals and the plants and the water and the air and the geology in a way that I didn't have a language for it because I was surrounded by mostly, it was about half and half Christian and Jewish community. I think this is in the 70s, that community's changed a lot since then, but I didn't know that paganism was a thing. I didn't know that Wicca was a thing. Right. And so I just figured this was just me being a weirdo and cool. And I was a kid. And that's just that was my little theology as a child, right? Super animist. And I had this sense of a horned god who was this shepherd of the woods or guardian of the woods or just somebody who was around. And then one day, as happens to children, I was at the public library and I was super interested in fairies, right? There's this beautiful illustrated book of fairies. And I used to go and find that. And in that same sort of area, there was also Erica Young's book, Witches, which if you've ever seen it, it has these amazing illustrations in them. And it's mostly Erica's poetry, but she also gives some history of the early modern witch trials. And it's mixed in with neo-pagan Wicca witchcraft stuff of that time period, which I had no idea. But at that time, that part of the Northeast was like the hotbed of Wicca. I just didn't know. And I think that book triggered something for me. And I used to do spells from it and whatever. And then I became a teenager and I left all that aside. I played D&D like other normal teenagers who had no friends other than my D&D buddies. And I went to college and I studied Holocaust studies and art. And I turned into a serious adult and had a career and all these things. And I was always interested in the visual culture of esotericism, particularly as it got presented, at least to me, in Western art history, which is its whole huge topic. But it was really when I was about 40 years old and I found out that a good acquaintance of mine was Wiccan. And I'd known her for a couple of years through the university. And I was is that real? Like, I thought that was like D&D. Fortunately, I did not say that to her while I was thinking it. And that just triggered this whole thing when I realized, oh, not only is it real, but here was this woman I knew who was incredibly intelligent, progressive, a feminist, like just really just, took no shits from anybody. And yet she had this religion that was so fringe, it seemed to me at the time. I just couldn't, it my brain was exploding basically for a year. And that kind of set me on this path to like really realize like there's so much to what's happening in the inner lives of people in the United States that we don't talk about, we don't think about. And not just like Wiccan witchcraft or esotericism and occultism, my curiosity spanned past that to think about, what are all the religions and spiritual practices and folk practices that exist in this country that aren't asked about on these Pew Research studies, right?
Yeah.
There's so many people who are like, I'm a nun, None, or like I'm spiritual but not religious. Like every single one of those people has a complex, rich inner life.
Yes.
It's just, there's not a checkbox for that on these surveys. So anyway, that's the sprawling version. Missing a lot of details, but that's it to make it easier to edit.
Yeah. No, that's perfect. Oh my gosh. First of all, the woods. As a kid, oh my gosh. As a kid, I used to where I grew up initially, like when I was like 5, 6, we didn't have woods behind like our apartment complex, but we had like a golf course. Yeah. And before the golf course was just like a line of trees. And then between the trees, the golf course could ride. I used to make that like a path to like Narnia. I would just I would make up all these stories about where it was going. And then like beyond that was the golf course. So like in the middle of the afternoon when I was a kid, there was nobody at the golf course. So I would go to, there was a little gazebo. I would call it the castle. Like I went in. And then when we moved to a different place behind that apartment complex were woods, and I was a little bit older. I used to go in those woods all the time. And like now I think about it, like there's a bunch of ticks. Like I thank God I don't have Lyme's disease. I was walking around the woods. There's like mad ticks and there's like garden snakes and stuff. Like whatever. Oh, yeah. I'm just walking around the woods, just like woo, like making all sorts of stories up. Yeah, in New Jersey. It's like the second most densely populated state in the country. But yeah, there's just woods everywhere. Like it's wood.
No. And it's full of life. Like, yeah, yes. I used to go for these like these journeys into the woods, into my mind, into this nether region, whatever. Which I now in hindsight, like once in a while, there's a really nice park near where I live, and I'll go there and try to like enter that same headspace. But invariably, I'm like, it's way creepier when you're like a 50-year-old woman by yourself in the woods. It's cute when it's a kid.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, like I'd come home and I was all like bloody and scratched up from like briars and then in the fall, like I would stain all my coats with pokeberries, and my mom would be like, "Oh my gosh, like, can you keep anything clean?" No, absolutely I must go on my vision quest into the woods.
Exactly. It's like I'm looking for something, and my mom would be like, "Please don't get lost." I feel like I'm so like,
yeah. I'm looking for the devil in the woods. I mean, basically. I mean, I didn't think of it that way, but in hindsight.
I know. And I always I would joke with my mom now, and my mom's just, she's like, was I a bad parent? I was just letting you go in the woods all the time. But she didn't know. I'd be like, I'm going out to ride my bike. I'll be back in whatever. And then I'd come back and I was all dirty. And it was because I dropped my bike outside the woods, and then I would walk around and then get it. And of course you have to get a huge stick because that's your stuff. Yeah.
Right. No, totally.
Yeah, you have to
Oh, yeah.
find one. Yes.
I mean, I feel like we make these jokes about like the stick that you find and
Yeah.
it's like precious and amazing. You put it on your altar and like 6 months later, your altar is like covered in like sticks and rocks and like detritus. But it's like, it's true. And it starts when you're a kid. I remember there was like this floodplain in the woods by this canal
Mhm.
and it flooded one year when the Canadian geese were like nesting and like it
Mhm.
was weird because it was in the woods. I don't know. I don't understand geese biology. I'm not going to pretend.
Me either.
But anyway, I found this flooded geese nest and there was one egg there and the geese were just like MIA. And so I took this goose egg home and I was like, I'm going to incubate this and it's going to be my familiar. It's going to be a goose and like this whole thing. My mom, meanwhile, was like looking at me side. Please don't let that thing crack in the mouth. It's going to stink to high heaven. And I'm like, yes, of sulfur. My poor mom.
I know. Oh man, God bless parents of imaginative children because you guys are just acting like it's not weird and we're so weird.
I know. I think about that very often. I'm like, man, I was really lucky that they were very supportive of my weird.
Exactly. I feel like both my parents were just like, okay, you're bringing more random rocks into the house. Cool. Whatever. Keep dreaming. It's like, well, I'm not doing drugs, so I guess it's fine. Yeah.
I know. I mean, that's the other thing is like growing up in New Jersey, you're like, what are the worst things that I could be doing? There's a lot of options. It's a rich territory.
Tons. I'm like
magic, occultism, witchcraft, very low stakes.
Exactly. I know. I feel like my parents were like, well, she likes to read. And if she likes rocks and has a bunch of rocks in a shoebox under her bed, that's not that bad. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
Oh God, that's so funny. But also what you were talking about, like all these people who, especially in the US, right? Because we are so many different kinds of people come here and live here. We do have all these traditions that like people don't know about anything about. Like, and I know growing up when I like started to be like interested in magic and all that kind of stuff, the only outside my own family, the only other magic that I ever read books about or saw was like Wicca.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. So I was like, okay, I guess this is just white people witchcraft and this is the only kind. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah. I was like, okay. So like, I was always searching for this can't be. And then when I got older and read more books, I'm like, oh, so there's different types of witchiness in other societies. But at that time too, not like it was so long ago, but it was in terms of like, it wasn't popular. This is like the late 90s, early 2000s. The only books you could get were books written by like usually a white woman, which is cool. It's nothing wrong with it, but it was just like, that's the only books you read about that kind of tradition. So now, thankfully, a lot more people from different traditions are coming up. And now we have podcasts like this and like yours where you can hear from other people, which is really exciting. So you're doing a great service to all the other AKA weird kids. Like, no, you're not weird. We're not like not in a bad way, like in a good way. Like,
we fly our freak flags. It's
exactly.
fine.
Yeah. All you D&D kids, all you kids going into the woods, you're fine. Don't worry about it. You're gonna be fine. Yeah, but now you can learn about all different types of traditions. So that's exciting. Yeah.
Yeah, it's totally a thing. And getting to that, it's funny because I have a lot of different practices that I think is really something that's still pronounced in publishing of books on Wicca is just that it's less cis and it's less het than it used to be. So that is progress.
Yeah.
But it's like if you look at the published materials, and I don't want to knock the publishers. This is like a shitty.
Of course not.
Publishers.
Yeah.
That's a whole thing. But like representation matters, and if you don't see yourself in that community, that's a wall. And I remember the first time I came across do you know Crystal Blanton?
I've heard of her. Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out an episode so I can interview her. Like I just want to craft an episode so I can talk to her because she wrote these amazing books about racism in pagan spaces, specifically focusing around Wicca. And she, in these texts, like identified as Wiccan. And I was like, why is this self-published? Why isn't this getting picked up and promoted by the big publishers?
Yeah.
And that's the thing that still happens. But like, at the same time, I'm like, you know what? We do have TikTok now. We have Instagram. And there are a lot of Wiccans of color on those spaces.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just sitting here waiting for them to write books so I can read them. But
I
it's
know.
absolutely a thing. It's absolutely a thing. And I
Yes.
think talking about the history of religion and spirituality and magic and race and class and gender in the United
Mm-hmm.
States, like they all weave together. You cannot separate
Yes.
them.
Yes. There's so like it's so weird because Crystal wrote those books, and you can see like that even in the beginning 20 years ago there were still these weird barriers like to other
Mhm.
people joining these communities. So it was like, oh yeah, you
Yeah,
like
yeah.
magic and stuff, but like I don't know, you're not the right race, you aren't the right
Yep.
gender, or like even like being queer was like, oh, we don't
Right.
know about this yet. Like, so it was, now it's like at least these, like you said, we have TikTok, we have Instagram, people at
Right.
least can say that, like say what they want, and their voices
Right.
can be heard, and we can hear like so many different opinions throughout the community, which is really awesome.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, the more diverse, and same thing, not knocking books because there's so many great authors and
Yeah.
so many good contributions, but yeah, of course, the more diversity we can have, the better, because everybody deserves to see themselves in these traditions and be able
Yeah.
to feel like they belong to it.
Yeah. And
So
that's another thing that's really struck me in researching for different episodes is
Mhm.
that a lot of these episodes are looking at historic moments in time.
Mhm.
And so every single episode also features contemporary practitioners of whatever that particular practice is.
Mhm.
Because which is tricky because you can have 5 people who practice Pennsylvania Dutch powwow, Brockerai,
Yeah.
and like they can all identify religiously as different things and do
Yes.
it in fairly nuanced ways. But anyway, that's a whole thing. But oh no, don't lose your train of thought, Heather. Oh, it's
You're
gonna
fine. You're
it's gonna
fine.
come here. I do this. It's like I start one way and then I come around. This is why my editor has to work really hard.
That's
Um
it.
Okay. I got it. Yeah. One of the things that I've learned is that if I'm researching something that even happened in like the early 90s, right? Like when I'm interviewing practitioners, I need to find somebody who's doing that particular practice right now
Yeah.
and has been doing it for a while so that they know that history of where it was at the 90s and can be like, yeah, guess what? Think about everything else in society and how that's evolved over the last 20, 30 years. Like
Mhm.
occult practices, esoteric practices, religions broadly, that's no different.
Yeah.
So, like, I totally remember my son was born. This is like why I remember Obama coming into the White House and somebody asked him about queer rights. And he was like, I'm thinking about it. And I
Mhm.
remember, like, that kind of hurt. Like, I'm like,
Yeah.
what is there to think about? Like,
Yeah,
dude.
yeah.
But to his credit, like, he did actually evolve, at least
Mhm.
maybe he was already evolved, I don't know, but, like, he talked about that process of his thinking expanding and his
Mhm.
understanding of the world expanding, and I think religions do that too because they're made up
Yeah.
of individuals, and if not everybody is really comfortable with shaking up their worldview periodically, but the people who do that on the regular and who practice occult practices, they're changing those practices too. Anyway, that
No,
was
it's
weird and abstract and rambling.
no, it's fine. No, because when you're talking about that, it makes me think of the Pope,
Yeah.
right? Like Pope Francis. I have a theory about Pope Francis, like you were just saying about Obama. I feel like Pope Francis doesn't care if people are
Yeah.
gay. I really
Yeah.
don't think he cares. I don't think
Yeah.
he cares if people are trans. He's like, do what you want to do. But I think he
Yeah.
can't piss everybody off. So he's just,
Yeah.
I have to gently ease everyone into this before I die. That's just my theory. I don't know if it's true, but it's the
That's
same.
what I think too.
Yeah, I think he's just like, I'm trying my best. I feel like he's looking at the other Catholics who are liberal. He's like, you guys, I'm trying. He's like, I just said like it's okay to be gay. I just said it kind of. So like, I'm doing my best here. He's struggling.
It's like this papal long con. It's like papal cultural long con.
Oh,
Like,
100%.
Yeah.
He's praying to God every night. He's like, God, how do I tell them that I really don't mind if people are trans? It doesn't bother me.
Yeah.
Every night he's praying about it. I don't know what to do.
That would be quite superb.
I know.
I'm hoping for.
Me too. This is my like fantasy about that sounds weird. But like the way I feel this is just like what I think of. I want to get him in a room one day, just like me and him just sit and chat. Like, Okay, Francis, let's really talk. Like,
Okay.
what do you, like, you're a whole scientist, so I know you know stuff. Like,
Yeah. Okay, Francis, we're turning off the mics now.
Exactly. And he's
Okay.
like, girl, listen, my best friend is gay and I know, like, it's all good. And I'm like, I knew it.
I mean, that would be really beautiful. I mean,
I know.
it's funny because it's like part of me like gets really ragey and I'm just like,
Yeah.
I want things to move fast, like now. Like I want this, like, God only knows, like I have a 15-year-old, he's almost
Mhm.
16, and like I'm like, I think, man, the world he's gonna inherit is gonna be such a shit show.
Yeah.
And it's like, how do we minimize the amount of shit showiness? You know? So things like that. I'm like, come on, let's move fast.
Yes,
But
I know.
but I'm not in those positions of power and responsibility, thank goodness. So
It's so hard, right? And then, like, these institutions, whether it's like the American government, the Catholic Church, it's hundreds of years in history, and then the people who made it up, and then the people along the way. Like, there's so many things to go. So, like, I have the same way. I'm like, can we just stop the shit? Like, let's just do whatever we want. But it's like, okay, I have to remember that there's a history of this. Like, we can't change everything at once because that's also going to be chaos and confusion. And for some reason, everyone's going to
yeah.
get upset. I don't know why, but whatever. Like, like, whatever. I get it. People can't handle change. I get it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I know it's rough out here. Hi, everybody. I hope you're enjoying this episode of Dine with the Divine. I'm here because I want to tell you about a new segment that we're putting in place because I don't want to just tell you stories. I want to hear your stories. So if you have a comment or an experience about something that we talk about or one of the characters, ancestors, or deities, you can leave a message on my website, dinewiththedivine.com. You can leave a voice note there also, or you can email me at dinewiththedivinepod@gmail.com. When you tell me your stories, when you leave your comments, I will read them on our bonus episodes. This segment's going to be called Last Call. Ha ha ha. Get it? I love it. I'm really excited because I definitely want to hear more from all of you. So if you are a Diners Club member, you will hear all these wonderful stories on your episodes when I get the comments in. So thanks so much. Can't wait to hear from all of you and keep enjoying the show. So anyway, on that beautiful note, we're going to talk about our dish of the week. So our dish of the week is once again weird this week because I was like, we're going to talk about Puritans in a second because why not? It's been I don't think we've talked about Puritans.
Why not?
Yeah, and Heather hosts Magic in the United States, so let's do it. So I was like, what did Puritans eat? Because that's what I wanted to know. So there's I was like, what's going on in the Puritan kitchen? So there's this, I found some excerpts from this cookbook from 1615. Yeah, that was called The English Housewife. Now, this is, yeah, I know. I'm like,
going.
I know. So this is making a young turkey. I don't know why a turkey has to be young. I don't know too much about cooking turkeys. I don't know. I guess if you have to pluck the turkey is a situation. I don't know. Anyway, So this is what it says. If you boil chickens, young turkeys, peahens, whatever that is, any house fowl daintily, you shall, after you have trimmed them, drawn them, trussed them, okay, wash them, fill their bellies as full of parsley as can hold. Yeah. Then boil them with salt and water only till they be enough. I don't know what that means, but that's fine. Then take a dish and put it in verjuice, which is the juice of sour crab apples. And and butter and salt. And when the butter is melted, take the parsley out of the chicken belly, mince it very small, put it in the crab apple sauce situation and butter, and then stir it together, and then lay in the chickens, trim the dish with snippets, just fried, like croutons, fried or toasted slices of breads, and serve it. Actually, that sounds okay. I could eat that.
That actually sounds okay. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. I would
Yeah.
try it.
Yeah, we'll try that. Then if you got some deer meat, you're going to do this. So you're going to wash it, clean all the blood. Hopefully, that'd be great. Then you stick it with cloves all over the outside. And if it be lean, you shall lard it either with mutton lard, pork lard, but mutton is the best lard. Okay.
Okay.
Then spit. Oh, put it on a spit. Okay.
Right.
And then roast it by a soaking fire, which is a slow roasting fire.
Okay.
Then take vinegar, breadcrumbs, and some gravy, which comes from the venison, and boil them well in a dish. Then season it with sugar, cinnamon, ginger, salt, and serve the venison forth upon the sauce when it is roasted enough. Okay.
That
Fair.
actually sounds good too.
Yeah, that doesn't sound bad. Okay. And then this last one is a sauce for a turkey. Okay. So this turkey sauce is take fair water, whatever that means, and set it over a fire. Then slice a good store of onions and put it in, and also salt and pepper and a good store of the gravy that comes from the turkey that you already made. Then boil them together. Then take a few fine crumbs of grated bread and thicken it. Fair. A very little sugar and some vinegar, and then serve it up with the turkey. Or take grated white bread and boil it in white wine till it be thick as a galantine, a sauce made from blood. Okay.
I thought galantine was like Galentine's Day.
That's what I thought too.
Right.
I know. I'm like, Galentine's Day is the best. And love it.
Cool.
And in the boiling, put a good store of sugar and cinnamon. Then a little turnsole, which is a plant that's used as red food coloring. Make it of a high murky color, and so serve it in saucers with the turkey in the manner of a galantine. Okay. So that's turkey gravy. What Puritans would have made of turkey gravy.
Huh.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah, that's actually neat.
And now when you first mentioned Puritans, I was like, oh, I actually know very little about Puritans. But now I'm like, I think I might actually know less about cooking. So it might be okay.
I think you're absolutely fine. Also, the Puritans are just like, they're just out here being annoying, to be honest. They're doing the most, and like nobody asked them to do it. So,
Yep.
Exactly. So now we'll talk about, we're going to do tea time, which is going to be our Puritan magic. So I'm like, I was like, did the Puritans do magic? I have a question because they were, because they were supposed to be super pure, right? There's the whole time, like being a Puritan, they're supposed to be like reading the Bible like exclusively and just doing stuff from the Bible.
Right.
So Puritans, okay, so the main thing you need to know is that Puritans thought everything was magic was the devil. Puritans thought everything was the devil. I think the idle hands are the devil's workshop comes from Puritans, I'm pretty sure. They were obsessed with devil. Yeah. They were like obsessed with that. Yeah. They love to work. Like, so, okay. Whatever, girl. That's fine. Yeah. So actually, you will know a little bit about this from your other podcast that you had, Familiarship. Yeah. So they thought everything was the devil, but they didn't care. They did it anyway. So here's the thing. So England, which is where most of the Puritans came from, they had a long history of folk magic already. And it was done by these cunning women. So this was usually a term used in southern England and the Midlands, and sometimes in Wales. And these people were sometimes known as like wizards or wise men or wise women. And in southern England and Wales, they were known sometimes as conjurers, or a word that I can't say because it's in Welsh and I can't pronounce Welsh words. I'm so sorry.
There's also Peller. Peller, I think, is one of the ones.
Yes. Yep. That was the next one. In Cornwall, they said they use them. They call Pellers. And then they think it came from the word expellers. Yeah. So that was interesting. So they also use the word like white witch or sometimes black witch, depending on what they thought the person was doing. And we'll get into that later. So there was no really big widespread persecution at first of like witches, because most people saw two categories. So they thought you were like, if you were just a cunning woman or like cunning folk, they were like, oh, you're cool because you're like helping people. Right. But you were only a witch if you did something that was bad and you hurt someone.
Right. Yeah.
But if you're just making charms and shit and you're like helping people get better, they're like, that's fine. So some of the spells and charms that had been used in Anglo-Saxon polytheistic era, they continued to be used after Christianization of England. And even though it was like a long time ago, people were still using it. One of the really popular forms of divination back then was egg scrying. So cracking an egg and putting it in water and trying to read it. or doing palm readings. So much so that there was this really famous preacher, this Puritan guy. His name was Cotton Mathers. And he used to get pissed off. One time he made a whole sermon about how he was tired of having all these palm reading books in the New World. He's like, this is crazy. He's like, everyone stop reading palms. He was tired of it. He wouldn't stop talking about it. Cotton, sorry. Pastor Cotton was pissed. So another thing was, because now back in these days, well, now too, because women had a lesser position in society, whatever their husbands did was going to affect them. So a lot of the time, the people going to these cunning folk or quote unquote witches, whoever they felt they were good or bad, they were women, because they had to figure out what the fuck was going on. Like, are we going to have to move? Are we going to be poor? Are we going to be rich? Because I don't know, my husband controls my whole life. So there was an industry for women by women. And the one thing they also did was, like, they would help people find stuff, these cunning folk. That was nice. It was also very popular to hex people. Like, if someone pissed you off, someone probably stole your chickens, you got to hex them a little bit, because don't steal somebody else's chickens. That's not nice. It was also really popular to use puppets or like dolls that people would use in the whole voodoo doll style, right? Afflicting them, poking them where they wanted the person to get hurt. They would use ritual charms a lot that would have prayers written from like Catholic masses in like these charms. So the thing about Puritans is they didn't like Catholic people. So this was also like bad, right? Yeah, the whole thing was that Puritans thought that like Catholic people were doing the most. They didn't think they needed to have all that money, and they didn't think that the way they read the Bible was right. They didn't like all the politics. So having these little Catholic prayers written down in charms, like, that was magic, and it was bad. And they were like, So also there was a couple interesting things that I read that was like, this is how you find out if someone hexed you. Okay. So if you needed to find out if someone was hexed you, you would take your own urine and then you would boil it with nails. And then the logic was, if you did this, the person who hexed you, their urine was going to boil inside their body. And I was like, what? So they would have hot urine and they'd be very uncomfortable.
With rusty nails and pins.
Yeah. Ooh, yeah. That sounds like a UTI of hell. Like, yeah.
Yep, pretty much.
It's a pretty bad one. Another one they would do is they would make these urine cakes, which sounds bad and gross. So they would get urine and they would mix them in with rye flour. They'd make a cake of it and then feed it to a dog, which is mean. Don't do that. So then if the dog, were we going to say something?
I mean, I was like, I don't know. Like, I've seen dogs eat all kinds of strange shit. Like, I'm sure they're probably like, oh, rye flour, a little bit of pea in it. Ew. You know,
that's probably true though.
Yeah, but I think the intention is probably not cool, because anyway, I'll let you keep talking.
No, it's fine. The intention's not cool. I'm thinking of my sister's dog, and she'd probably eat it a little bit. She'd probably be like, sniff it and be like, this is probably a treat. I'll eat this. Yeah. Yeah. If we just tell her it's a treat, she'll eat it. Like, she don't care. So love you, Pink. So then if the dog started acting the way the person had acted who was like afflicted, then they knew they were hexed. And oh no, now they have to fix it. So people were like, how did the magic actually come to these Puritans? Like, how did they figure this out? If they're so obsessed with the Bible and just being super, super Christian, how did it happen? The thing about it was the people who came to the colonies were not all Puritans. There was a mix of people. And sometimes the Puritans would learn it from other people, but also they were living in this wild, unsettled place. So they were like, whatever will work. We got to make a urine cake. We're making a urine cake. If we've got to make some poppets, let's make some poppets, whatever. Nobody knows what's going on here. There's the native people were here and they didn't know how to deal with them. Obviously, that's still going on today. Everybody's a hot mess. So they were like, if we got to use whatever magic we know, let's do it. So the Puritans also had a very specific lack of like any type of ritual. They didn't really have, in Catholicism, there's a lot of rituals. Puritans didn't have that. So to have ritual, like, we don't realize it, I think sometimes, in the world that we live in that's very like secular most of the time, that like we love rituals, right?
Yeah.
We love having to do something a certain way. It makes you feel very connected to whatever you're doing or whatever it's about. And I think people just lack that as humans. They didn't have it. So having something like that made them feel better. And also, if you're in a situation where you don't know what to do or you feel like you have no power and doing a ritual makes you feel like you have power, you're going to do it to feel better. So there was that. They also believed, so when it came to divination too, this is interesting. Puritans they believed that everything was predestined already. So it was like, if you get a reading, it's fine because this was already going to happen to you. You're just basically like asking God what's going to happen. So it's okay. It's not a bad thing. And they all considered it folk magic, not like witch. Like, again, if it was okay, if nobody was getting hurt, it was folk magic. But if somebody was getting hurt, that was witchcraft. So then getting a little later and a little more south from the Puritans, like say they were in Massachusetts, right? You're going to go down south, New England area to like Virginia. And in 1644, a little farther in the future, maybe 20 years, there was this guy who was the governor. And he met this guy who claimed to know all of this stuff about astrological magic and necromancy. So we went from like real light magic to like real deep magic all of a sudden. Like, I'm like, what? So like the Puritans, when they came, they didn't really have a lot of money or anything. But then these guys, when they were coming a little bit later, they had money. So they had money, they had wealth, they had books, they could read. So there was this guy, his name was Thomas Tickle, and he had 333 books of occult texts in his library. And this is in 1697. Yeah, I was like, damn, okay.
That's kind of bonkers.
Exactly. I was like, sir, where'd you get all those books? You had to have them imported? Books are heavy. Yeah. Get them on that boat to England. That's a lot. So he had books about alchemy, astrological medicine, Rosicrucian texts, and Kabbalistic texts. Also, astrology was very popular during the colonial period. It was so weirdly enough, it was considered okay if you were using it for a medical reason. So so it was like sometimes they'd be like, oh, if such and such happened to you, you need to do this on this certain date because it's better and it will work better, whatever. And also it was found in almanacs, like for farmers and for people who had to live off the land and things like that. Then it was fine. So that's mostly the history I got on some colonial magic here. I got a lot of this from a really good video from this guy. I think it's Esoterica on YouTube. He has a lot of really good videos. Yeah. So I got it from him. So that's where we're going to stop in time because I'm like, we could go on and on, but I'm not going to.
That's rad. And I would just say too, and this is something that comes up in my podcast a lot, is that when you have these practices like that, often, especially in the present day, or folks who are out who don't do those practices, we call it magic.
Yeah.
But the people who are doing it would never in a million years have called it. And so if you had a midwife and she came and was like helping you give birth or whatever, and then the baby died, like that might be one of those circumstances where you like, you know what, she's a witch.
Exactly.
But before that, before something bad goes down, like she's just a midwife, right?
Yes.
And astrology, that line between what was a science and what was an esoteric or occult practice got really blurry. And that sort of distinction between all of this stuff over here is esoteric and occult and woo, and all of this over here is science. That's a fairly modern invention in terms of how we think about these things. And there's a philosopher, Jason Ananda Josephson Storm, who wrote this amazing book called The Myth of Disenchantment that really unpacks that. And for like cunning folk stuff, which is super, super fascinating, Owen Davies is a historian in the UK, and he's got a bunch of books. And he has a really great one on magic and witchcraft in the United States in relation to cunning craft too.
Ooh, okay. Ooh, I'm going to put that in the show notes. So if you guys want to read more about that, I think that's a great source. Ooh, I love that. Okay. Yeah. Yay. All right. So now we're going to have our story time. And when we're done, you'll be like, why did you tell this story? It's just because it's weird. But it has a lot to do with occult people and occult figures. So don't worry, it's going to be fine. So, have you ever heard, do you know who Jack Parsons is?
Yeah.
All right, here we go. We're going to go on a wild ride, everybody.
Yeah. Fun. Good times. Buckle up. Get your rocket ships ready.
I know. I was like, the whole time. And so I was like researching. I was like, oh, let's see if some occultists who are like from the United States, since we were going to chat. And I was like, and I saw this name, Jack Parsons. I couldn't remember how I knew who this guy was. I was like, I know this name. And then I remembered, and we're going to see later on why I knew this guy. But oh my God. So, okay. So let me tell you about this secular Jack Parsons first. So this guy, he's born John Whiteside Parsons. That was his full name. He was born October 2nd, 1914. He was a rocket engineer, a chemist, and he was just like really freaking smart. So he was associated with Caltech. He was one of the founders of both the Jet Propulsion Laboratory and the Aerojet Engineering Corporation. He invented the first rocket engine that used a castable composite rocket propellant and pioneered the advancement of both liquid fuel and solid fuel rockets. So this guy was smart as shit. Like, he was really cool. Well, this part of him was. It gets okay, don't worry. So he was born in Los Angeles. When he was born, things were cool. He had his mother and his father, and they were a well-off family. So what had happened was, though, his mom found out that his dad was seeing sex workers. She didn't like that, and they got divorced. Now, his dad moved to Boston or something, and Jack stayed with his mom. His dad was the breadwinner, so his mom was like, oh, shit, what are we going to do? So his mom came from a pretty wealthy-ish family. So her parents were like, don't worry, we're going to come down there to Pasadena. We're going to all buy a house and we're all going to live together. It's going to be fine. Cool. So they did. So Jack lived in a good part of town. So we went to school. He did pretty badly in school, but they think he had undiagnosed dyslexia probably. And he really loved mythology and science fiction. He was really into reading all these books. And then when he was young, he also started to develop an interest in like rockets. And in 1928, he began doing these rocket experiments with his friend, Edward Foreman. He had like just a few friends. He also started investigating like occultism, and he started to perform these. One time he performed a ritual that he tried to invoke the devil into his bedroom, but then he got scared, so he stopped because he thought it worked. So he's like, oh shit. So he stopped. He went to Pasadena Junior College and then Stanford, but then his grandpa died. So his grandpa had most of the money. So he wasn't able to continue. And it was also like the Great Depression at this point. So then in 1934, he united with Foreman, his friend, and his other friend, Melina, and they formed the Caltech affiliated Guggenheim Aeronautical Laboratory Rocket Research Group. And then in 1939, he gained funding from the National Academy of Sciences to work on a jet-assisted takeoff for the U.S. military. And after the U.S. entered World War II, he founded the Aerojet company in 1942 and developed JATO technology. Okay, so that's his secular life. So he was smart, yeah, and he was into rockets, and that's cool. So here's where it gets crazy, everybody. So in 1939, we're going to go back. In 1939, he had this friend, and he had this couple friend. Okay, by the way, he was married to a lady named Helen. She's really in this story, you'll see. So he's married to this woman named Helen. Him and Helen are cool. So he had this friend named John and his wife. No, sorry, they were brother and sister. He had his friend John and his sister Frances. They were like, oh, come and hang out at the church of Thelema. Now, if you're like, what's Thelema? Or some of you are like, I know what Thelema is. I'm going to tell you in a sec. So it was on Winona Boulevard in Hollywood. So he went there with his friends and with his wife, and they witnessed this Gnostic mass. And the celebrants of the church, they included a bunch of actors, and there was a gay rights activist named Harry Hay. So they were there, and they were having a great time. And Parsons was like, ooh, this is really cool. I think I've heard of this because of the founder, a little guy named Aleister Crowley. Anybody? You all know who that is. So he was the founder of the Ordo Templi Orientis. Yeah, I think so. The OTO, that's how we'll call it. The OTO. So the OTO is the organization and Thelema. And so Parsons had already read Crowley's books. Like, he was into it, especially one called Nox Om Pox. He read that and he was like into it. He really liked it. So Parsons, then he met all these other people. He met this lady named Regina Call, Jane Wolfe, and the guy who ran the church at the time, Wilford Talbot Smith. He was like the head of that church in California. So He said, Parsons, that he felt both repulsion and attraction for Smith. He didn't know what was going on, but he was like, this place is crazy. So he would go there once in a while throughout the next year, go to events, not go to events, and he would take his wife, and they were like into it. So he continued to read all these different books by Crowley. He kept getting more and more into it, and he also was encouraging his wife to get more and more into it. And he really believed that Thelemic magic had a lot to do with quantum science, which he understood really well because he was a chemist and he made rockets and all that kind of stuff. So he thought, oh, this all goes together. So he tried to even get a lot of his friends into it. Some of them were like, bro, no, thank you. But a lot of them were like, no, this is cool. Yeah. So he had a friend named Grady Lewis McMurtry. Grady Lewis McMurtry. And he was a Caltech student that he was really good friends with. And then McMurtry's fiance, Claire, he was also good friends with, got her into it. And then Helen's sister, Sarah, also got into it. So he brought a couple people in. Now, Jack and Helen were then initiated into the Agape Lodge. That's what the place was called, the lodge. And then it was renamed the Church of Thelema later in February 1941. So he adopted the Thelemic motto of Thelema obtentum proidero amoris nuptiae, which is a Latin mistranslation of the establishment of Thelema through the rituals of love. So apparently he used to say this all the time, but it wasn't even right. And Crowley used to make fun of him because he's like, bro, you're not even saying it right, but he didn't care. Parsons is just going to say what he wanted. He didn't care about that at all. So he used to also have the phrases Topan, which was the motto, and he used to put it everywhere. And he also said it represented the Kabbalistic numerology 210, which was something that he associated with the occult. So all that stuff was happening. And then Helen became known as Soror Vermaud. That's like her new magical name. So Smith, that's the guy who's the head of the church, he wrote to Crowley and he was like, oh, Parsons is the best. He's super into it. I love having him part of the church. He's great. And then Wolf, his other friend, Jane Wolf, she wrote to the German OTO representative, this other guy named Grimmer. And he was like, oh my gosh, Jack is the best. He's an A1 kind of guy. He reminds me of Crowley. He's so cool. Cool. So everybody loved that. Crowley was like, oh, this is great. I love him. He's so great. And even Smith said to Parsons, Crowley said, no, I'm not going to read that part. Anyway, let me move on. Okay. My quotes are all getting confused. Okay. So here's where it also gets juicy, guys. There's a lot of tea in this story. So Helen went away for a little bit. She had to go somewhere in June 1941 and started sleeping with her sister. Oh my God. So Jack, okay, so here's the other thing. In the OTO, it was very free love, more than free love. It was like everybody was banging. Like that was just seemed what was going on here. So everybody was banging. It was fine. Everybody's cool with it. And then Jack started banging Sarah, Helen's sister. So when Helen came back, Sarah was like, oh, hey, sis, by the way, Jack's my husband now. And Helen's like, what? And then Jack was like, yeah, and by the way, Helen, I actually think Sarah's hotter than you. No lie. That's what he said. That's crazy. I can't believe he talked to his wife like that. Even if you don't like her anymore, you don't have to say that about her. I think your sister's hotter. That's mean. Okay. So it's so mean. I can't believe he said that. So Helen now is upset, obviously, because her husband's sleeping with her sister. Like, who wouldn't be upset? So she goes to Smith because that's her friend, and she's so upset. Oh my God, Smith, can you believe that Jack's sleeping with Jack's sleeping with Sarah. And Smith's, oh, you're there. And then Smith and Helen started sleeping together. Yep, sure did. And now, and Helen and Smith and Jack and Sarah, at first they were like fighting, right? But now they're all cool. Like they're all friends now. So everything worked out in the end. It was okay. And Jack now goes with Sarah. So now those two couples, along with a whole bunch of other members of the church, they all moved to this one house, which was like a big mansion on South Orange Grove Boulevard. It was an American Craftsman style mansion, if you need to know. And all the babies, and anybody who had kids, they brought their kids too. So they're all living. They all contributed $100 a month for rent, and they all lived like communally, and it was all cool. And this was like the new base of their church. And they had a bunch of livestock that they kept for meat, as well as if they had to do like a blood ritual. Okay, cool. Whatever, as long as everybody's cool with it. Jack, he decorated his new room with a big statue of Pan, swords and daggers everywhere. He converted the garage to a laundry room. He converted the garage and laundry room into a chemical laboratory. And he often held science fiction discussions in the kitchen, and he entertained the kids for hours because it was 25-acre garden. So he'd take the kids on fiery hunts and stuff. He was having a good time. It was cute. So now everybody, they're all living together. They're people. They argue sometimes. It's not a big deal. But everybody was super into Thelema, especially Jack. So he gave almost all of his salary to the OTO. Like, he would give all his money. He was basically supporting a bunch of the members, and he was supporting Crowley, who is still in London. He would give his money to Grummer. The German guy would give it to Crowley, which is like, okay, messed up. But also, we're going to do one of these days, I'm going to do it. We're going to do a whole episode just about Crowley, because his life was absolutely mad. So yeah, and at this point, I think he was on a ton of drugs, because I think this is like by the time he was like endish of his life, and he was doing a lot of drugs. Anyway, so Parsons, he realized that, so he was so into Thelema that it started to affect his personal life, because he would take this to work. Basically, he would appear at work. Okay, he works at like a jet factory. He's making rocket fuel. Probably shouldn't be hungover, right? Like, maybe don't be like, you just threw up in the parking lot when you have to like make jets. Like, it's probably not a good idea. Not a good look, Jack. So he come to work hungover, not good. And he was always talking about like, and he would be sleep deprived because he'd be doing all these rituals into the night. And at first, everybody was like, that's fine. Oh, there goes Jack and his weird magic shit. But after a while, they were like, Jack, like this is affecting your work. Like, this is getting really weird. And it was affecting the day-to-day business because Jack couldn't like get himself together. So he also was like singing all the time and reciting poetry. And they were like, can you just like do chemistry for a minute? You're at work. So because he was like a big part of like the day-to-day business of it was his company with his two friends, the FBI started to be like, this is getting weird, and the police started to investigate. So what I like was reading before, it was like nobody really said anything about it because they weren't bothering anybody. But once Jack started acting weird at work, they were like, okay, you're like working for the government now. You can't do this. It's getting too much. So then apparently the FBI started receiving these allegations of a black magic cult that was involved, that had all these sex orgies, which they probably did have sex orgies, but it seems like everybody was pretty much consenting. And there was a complainant, a 16-year-old boy, who said that he was assaulted at the lodge. And there was numerous reports of a ritual involving naked pregnant women jumping through fire. I don't know about all of that. But one thing I do know is, first of all, if somebody says they were assaulted, but I don't know what happened, but also it seems like there was a point that things started to change. So people started to come out with all these accusations that nobody had before. So I don't know what happened. But then Parsons told them, it's just an organization and we're dedicated to religious and philosophical speculations. So then they did an investigation. They said, okay, fine. You guys aren't doing anything wrong. Maybe just don't come to work drunk anymore. Like, it's okay. So now it's like, oh, I don't know the year yet. Don't worry about it. But anyway, we've been going for a while. Jack was a really heavy user of alcohol and marijuana. He always had been, but now he was using cocaine, amphetamines, peyote, mescaline, and other opiates. So he was just like drugged out now. And he continued to have a lot of sex with a lot of people. So they said that Jack, he was just a womanizer. That's what I read from every source. They say he was a womanizer. Some reports say he was very like effeminate. So some people did think he was gay. And there was a couple of reports of people saying he was gay. It doesn't matter. But the one thing I read everywhere was like, he was banging. Like, he was banging all these ladies. So then he got into trouble because he was also banging Claire. Claire was his friend McMurdy's fiance. And McMurdy got pissed because Jack tried to pay for Claire to have an abortion. Now, I don't know what McMurdy was mad about, the abortion or the pregnancy. I'm thinking he was probably mad that he got his fiance pregnant in first place. I don't know about the abortion. But after that, their friendship broke down because that's an awkward situation. So now things are going along, and Crowley and Grummer, they want Smith, who's the other guy who's in charge of the church, to get out. They think that he's a bad influence on the members, and they want to put Parsons in his place. But Parsons, he really has like an affinity for Smith. He really likes him, and they're really good friends. And he's with his ex basically, and he still likes him, and Helen are still cool. So Parsons and Helen wrote a letter defending Smith, but then Grimmer told them they better shut that letter down because they already made a decision. So Parsons was put as temporary head of the lodge. The other members didn't really like Parsons as much, but he used to make these really intense, charismatic speeches. So people really liked that. And people were like, okay, maybe he's really into it. It's fine. And they also, again, most people didn't like him because they thought he was banging everybody too much and causing too many problems. They're like, maybe stop having sex with everybody's wives and maybe husbands. Maybe chill with that. They didn't. So then, now Parsons is in charge. So Parsons, now he created this like journal where he was writing poetry, and like Crowley thought his poetry was bad. So he told him to stop. Crowley's like, this is terrible poetry. Stop writing and using my money to do it. And apparently he was talking about all his drug use in the poetry. And Crowley didn't like that. He's like, that's a bad look. Don't do that. All right. So now Helen, Jack's ex, she gave birth to a son by Smith, but gave that son the last name Parsons. I don't know why. Whatever. So Smith and Helen, then they left and they moved into a 2-bedroom cabin away from there with the baby. So now at the same time in England, Crowley looked at the astrological analysis of Smith in a birth chart and came to the conclusion that Smith was the incarnation of a god and he should go on retreat. This is just like another thing that Crowley was just trying to get rid of Smith. He didn't want him there. He's like, okay, now, dude, actually, you're a god, so you have to do something else. And everybody's like, what? Since when? Everybody knew that Crowley was just bullshitting, but whatever. They're like, it's fine. So then Smith just resigned because he was getting tired of everybody trying to boot him out. He resigned from the OTO. Parsons felt bad for Smith, and he would just let him stay around, though. He wouldn't kick him out of the place. So Parsons also continued to financially support Smith and Helen, even though him and Helen had officially now gotten a divorce. It was fine. And Crowley told Jack, stop talking to Smith, but he wouldn't because they're friends. So now in comes a new character. There came this guy to the lodge, and he had a name. You may have heard of him, L. Ron Hubbard. He came and he moved into the lodge, and him and Parsons became really close. So Parsons wrote to Crowley, and he was like, listen, L. Ron Hubbard never done a magical thing in his life, but there's something about this guy, and I like him. I don't know what it is. He's super magical. I'm so glad he's here. And he's whatever. Now, Parsons, Jack, and Sarah, Helen's sister, who he's now with, they had an open relationship. Obviously, I hope so, because Jack was banging everybody else. I hope Sarah is okay as long as she's cool with that. So they had an open relationship, and Sarah then became obsessed with L. Ron Hubbard, and she was like, I gotta be with L. Ron Hubbard. So Parsons, Jack, became super jealous. Even though he's out here banging everybody and their mom, he was so jealous of Sarah. How dare you be in love with L. Ron Hubbard? So it's fine, whatever. It was just happening. But now, because of this, Jack got weirder. Like, he wanted to do all this stuff that everybody was like, what are you doing? So the people in the lodge, he wanted to do quote unquote black magic, which I don't know the definitions here that the OTO has, but according to what I was reading, that's what they said. It was some magic that everybody was like, don't do that. Like, it's bad. So he started to try to invoke all these spirits. And apparently he invoked a bunch of banshees one time. And yeah, and there was screaming and everybody was freaked out. And they were like, please stop. Okay, this is a weird one, and I have to read it. Sorry, I'm going to read this straight out the Wikipedia page. In 1945, Parsons began a series of rituals based on Enochian magic where he masturbated onto a magical tablets accompanied by Sergei Prokofiev's second violin concerto. Okay. So apparently he's doing this weird ritual. L. Ron Hubbard's in the corner writing all of it down. This sounds like a lot. Like I was like, he's jerking off onto some tablets. It's too much. We're all like, and everybody's Jack. This is weird. So apparently he did this to invoke this deity name to Babon. He wanted to reincarnate this deity, this Thelema goddess. So after he did a bunch of these different things, and he would have all these visions, and his friends were doing this. It was a whole thing. So then he did another ritual. I don't know if it was like this, but it was somewhat similar. Anyway, it was the last ritual. He said, this is the last ritual I'm doing. When he got back to the house, he went to the Mojave Desert to do this ritual. Once he got back to the house, there was this lady there. Her name's Marjorie Cameron. And she was an unemployed illustrator and a former Navy wave, which I'm not sure what that is. I have to look it up. But somehow she was associated with the Navy. She had come to visit the lodge. So Jack started having sex with her, but he was sex magic because he believed that she was this god, Babon, that he tried to invoke. Now, Marjorie just thought they were banging. She had no idea. Marjorie was like, oh, I'm just having sex with this guy. And no lie, Jack was like a good-looking guy. Like, I was looking at pictures. I was like, Jack was cute. I don't blame all these women for trying to bang Jack. Later on, Marjorie's like, I didn't know we were doing sex magic. I just thought we were having sex. Whatever. So everybody in the house apparently knew that's what they were doing, but except Marjorie, nobody told her. So it was weird. Everybody kept like, I guess they would bang and then like they would come out and everybody's like, what happened? And she's like, I don't know. We just banged. Like, why is everybody so curious about what we're doing? So Cameron, she also said sometimes that she would see UFOs and she was telling him about that. Okay. So then Parsons read another novel that Crowley had written called Moonchild. And him and Hubbard were like, we're going to make a magical baby somehow through somebody, through immaculate conception. Okay, fine. So they were like, it's going to be born to a woman somewhere on Earth in 9 months. We're going to do this whole ritual and see what happens. So they were doing this ritual again, embodying Babylon, this god. And Cameron then was like, okay, this is getting like really crazy. I think I gotta bounce. And Parsons was like, okay, I'm gonna go into the desert and I'm gonna like do all this other magic stuff. It's very confusing. He just went to the desert to do more magic stuff. He told Crowley about it. Crowley was like, that's weird. Why are you doing that? If Aleister Crowley tells you something's weird, it's weird. Says, don't try to make a baby. That doesn't make sense. So then stuff was getting weird. And then they were like, Jack was running out of money. So he had to end up selling the lodge. So he did. And they had to meet elsewhere for rituals. And I guess he had to move. So he also everything was going downhill. Remember, Jack is doing tons of drugs. So everything isn't functioning the way it used to. So then he co-founded a company called Allied Enterprises with Hubbard and Sarah. And he invested his life savings, which was $20,000. I don't know the conversion. It's probably $1 million since inflation's so bad. So he gave him all his money. So Hubbard then was like, oh, okay, thanks for giving your money. What we're going to do is I'm going to go to Miami and I'm going to purchase 3 yachts. And then I'm going to sail them through the Panama Canal. And then we're going to sell them. I don't know why this was a plan that anybody thought was a good idea. This sounds like the scammiest scam in Scamville. I don't know. I was like, what? So meanwhile, Parsons was like, yeah, sure. I don't know if Parsons was in his total right mind because all of his friends were like, bro, this is a terrible idea. He said, no, I trust Hubbard and Sarah. You shouldn't. So now Hubbard had secretly requested permission from the U.S. Navy to sail to China and South and Central America on a mission to collect writing materials. Okay. What's that?
What? You
What?
got balloons.
Let's see.
That was amazing.
Oh, that was weird. Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I've never.
I know. I didn't know this program gave you balloons when you do hand signals. Okay, I gotta research
I know
that.
now. That felt synchronous.
I
I'm like,
know.
okay.
I was
Wait,
like, what's
like
happening?
I'm writing material. That was so cool.
I know.
Okay, wait. Just so listeners who
Yes.
don't see the video know what happened. So Ashley just did like air quotes, like with her fingers, describing how like L. Ron Hubbard was going to go to like South America to collect writing material, air quotes. I'm trying to recreate it. It's not working. So she did air quotes in the video, and these like animated balloons started floating up in front of her. And like, I was like, are those real balloons? Like, is this, what's going on?
Could you imagine if all of a sudden, like, we're just chatting and like balloons just start flying all over me and be like,
and then, I mean, okay, I just need to say too, we
Yeah.
use Riverside for all the interviews for my podcast.
Yeah.
I've never seen that.
Me-
That's amazing.
This is
you invoked balloons.
I guess so. I'm talking about Babylon and all these people I'm invoking. Okay. Oh my god.
Anyway, sorry.
No,
Go
this was an important part of the show because that's never happened to me either while I was interviewing anybody. That's never okay. I have to research this later on and be like, Riverside, what are you guys doing over there? Oh my gosh, that is hilarious. So L. Ron Hubbard, who didn't have balloons, I mean, but he had a scam in mind. He left with these boats, and then Jack Parsons was broke. He gave him his life savings, and he found out when he realized, like, oh my God, they're not coming back. He discovered that they left for Miami with $10,000 of the money that they were supposed to use for these boats. He found where L. Ron Hubbard was, and he's like, oh my God, this is a scam. But then L. Ron Hubbard called him. He was like, no, it's chill, calm down. It's a business thing. And for some reason, Jack believed them. I don't know why. But then Crowley, he was gossiping about Jack to Grimmer, the German guy, and he's like, Jack is a weak fool. And L. Ron Hubbard got the best of him. Then Parsons, he changed his mind once he found out that everyone's making fun of him. And he went to Miami to try to find them. And he placed a temporary injunction and restraining order on Hubbard and Sarah. So then he tracked them down to this harbor in County Causeway. And he discovered that they had purchased the 3 yachts, but they tried to flee on the yachts to get away from Jack. No. But they were forced to return to port because they hit a squall, like a storm situation. So then Jack was convinced that he had brought them back to shore through a lesser banishing ritual that he had done, which invocated Bartzabel, a vengeful spirit of Mars. So he's like, oh, I use magic and I got you guys back. So then they dissolved this business that they had, Allied Enterprises, in court, and L. Ron Hubbard was required to promise to reimburse Jack. Jack was so discouraged about this whole thing, and he was so upset that Sarah had done this. But Sarah then was like, we're not going to pay you. I'm going to call the cops and say that report you for statutory rape. Because when they started sleeping together, Sarah was 17. Jack was, I don't remember how old, but he was like probably in his mid-late 20s. So she's like, I'm going to report you to the police. Don't bother me and L. Ron. So Parsons, then he got nervous and he was like, fine. And they only gave him like $3,000. Meanwhile, they took $20,000 from him. And L. Ron Hubbard, he was already married. But he went and then married Sarah when he was already married to a lady named Margaret Grubb. And then he went on to do what he did, Dianetics and Scientology and all that bullshit. But a lot of the stuff that he got from that also came from the OTO. So then the Church of Scientology, they like have released statements saying basically, this is not true. I don't think it is, at least. I'm not a lawyer, but the Church of Scientology's released statements saying that L. Ron Hubbard was sent as an undercover agent by the U.S. Navy to intercept and destroy Parsons' black magic cult and to save Sarah from influence. Now, I don't know why the U.S. Navy needed to save Sarah. That doesn't really make a lot of sense. Sarah was not an asset. She was just a regular ass person, but okay. So they made up this story to like, I kind of disassociate L. Ron Hubbard from the OTO, from Aleister Crowley, but he was living there for a while. And then he wrote, Jack went back to California after all this drama. He completed the sale of the parsonage, which was then demolished. And he resigned from the OTO because he was like a hot ass mess at this time. And he wrote that he did not believe as an autocratic organization that the OTO constitutes a true and proper medium for the expression and attainment of Thelema. So Jack wrote a lot of other occult books, and he was a libertarian. He wrote books about that. Historians of Western esoteric tradition cite him as one of the most prominent figures in propagating Thelema across the United States and North America at large. Although at the time, people didn't look at him as like a big deal in even the scientific community, especially because he never had like formal training as a scientist. He didn't finish college, but he was just smart. Some people are just really smart. But so now he's known for being a big deal in Thelema in the US, but also being this rocket science. And that was the craziest person that I've read about lately. The story of Jack. Oh, and then in the 1940s, I think he died in 1947. Quick note. He got into some trouble because everybody thought he was a communist with the whole McCarthy era thing. And some people think he was murdered, but actually what they think happened is he was messing with some chemicals. He may have been a little bit drugged up and he dropped something that was combustible and he died. And that's what they saw. Some people said, well, oh, it was a suicide. Some people said it was a setup. What most likely happened is he was not totally clear-headed and he dropped something he knew not to drop. So that's the story of Jack Parsons. He said, I'm here for a good time, not a long time. He's the definition of that. Yeah, so that's Thelema and Jack Parsons in the US.
Oh yeah, it's such there's a book and also a TV show, although they only did one season, about Jack Parsons called Strange Angel. And the first season is so good. So just spoiler alert, they canceled it after that first season, right when L. Ron Hubbard shows up, and it's really disappointing because like that's when it starts getting really good.
Yeah.
But Marjorie Cameron is a fascinating figure, and one of the things that often doesn't get written about is just the profound role of women in occultism and esotericism. And Marjorie Cameron, just after Jack died, she went on to lead this amazing, astounding life. And like, you have to look at like the sort of communal living, the open relationships, the free love. If you look at a lot of that in a historical context, in terms of like, this was like 1950s California, right? And then by the time Jack died, like we're getting into the counterculture movement.
Yes.
So this wasn't just a Jack Parsons Thelema thing. There was these larger cultural shifts that were happening at that time. And I think even with something like Dianetics, I think, and this is something that happens when I'm interviewing scholars a lot of the time, is that it's hard sometimes to set yourself some distance from the subject so that you can just say these things were meaningful to people at this time. It's weird as hell to me in my life, but that's okay. Like, there's going to be somebody someday who looks at me and is like, what is she doing? It's the strangest thing ever. She was like walking in the woods in New Jersey. What? So I think, and like Thelema and the OTO are really big, vibrant practices today. There's a great podcast called Thelema Now, which is hosted by Harper Feist. And anybody who's curious about like, well, okay, here's the story of Jack Parsons, but what is Thelema? What's up with that now?
Yeah.
That's a really great one. And so I think it's like, it's really worth listening to contemporary practitioners, because often it's, oh, like what they're doing doesn't actually sound that strange.
Yeah.
Because like anything, it evolves.
100%. And I hope like, okay, so I'll talk about things being weird. And again, like this is what people do. And so I'm not here to insult anybody. Yeah, this is just the context of the story. I was like, this is crazy. Like to me, again.
Oh no.
Yeah.
No. It's sorry. Like I was on some preliminary interviews earlier today with a bunch of scholars about New Thought. And New Thought led to this really kind of big sprawling thing, because it's still with us today. So like whenever you get on TikTok or Instagram and you like hashtag law of attraction or hashtag manifesting, or that's all New Thought. And when I was talking with these scholars, they were, and this is not all of them. I think they didn't know me and they didn't know my podcast. So they were like, they were talking in a very dismissive way about people who participate in that. And I was like, yeah, like every religious spiritual practice has problems, right?
Yeah.
Because they're practiced by people and people have problems.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
and it's like, yeah, like people make terrible choices in their lives. And like being able to parse out when is that a function of a belief system and when is it like just that person making a really shitty choice? Like that happens in every religion and every practice. So I don't know. It's something that's on my brain a lot because I get really dismissive of it too. And I'm like trying to train myself to like not be.
Yeah.
It's been really cool because I'm like, oh, these are my biases. Cool.
Yeah.
Biases. I now have to engage with you
Exactly.
and not be biased. Shit.
Exactly.
It's hard work.
It's so hard. And I try to do the same thing. Like I never want to shit on anybody's belief system, but I will sometimes shit on the things people do. Like individually, like that's shitty. Like Jack, that's no problem that he's part of the OTO and he's doing all this Thelema. That's great. I think it's shitty that he slept with his wife's sister. I think that's pretty shitty.
Yeah.
And then told his wife, I think you're ugly. That's not nice.
Yeah, that's just mean. Fundamentally.
Yeah. So I would never shit on anybody's belief system, just on some of the people who do stuff. That's not cool. Like, so it's the same way I always feel like I grew up, like, I love all my magical stuff. And then when I met a lot of magical people, it was always religion is bad and religion is evil and it's so bad. And when you grow up and you learn, I'm a teenager and I love emo music. And so now I'm like, I don't know, like all my friends are atheists, but I didn't think that like religion was bad. I thought that people suck sometimes. And are there are all Catholics bad? No. Are the priests who hurt kids bad? Yeah. So I always try to catch myself too, because I don't like when we do that. You know what I mean? It's not cool.
Oh yeah. It's so ingrained, and the layers of that are so like they're so pervasive. I think it was oh gosh, yeah. We're doing research right now for an episode about satanic panics, but I'm like, I want it to be about Lil Nas X's Satan shoes.
Oh my god,
because like
I love Lil Nas X so much,
right? I mean. Basically, I'm like, maybe in my fantasy world, like he'll talk to me, and then I can use that, like, right? Like I have this whole fantasy spinning out. It's really good. #manifesting.
Yes, absolutely.
Anyway.
I'm so sorry. I don't mean to interrupt you.
No.
I feel like Lil Nas X to me is like the little cousin that I want like in my life. Like I want a younger cousin who like goes out all the time and tells me what's cool and hip. And I want it to be Lil Nas X because he's just adorable. I love him so much.
And, oh my God. Preach. Right? Seriously.
I love him.
I can't handle it. Like sometimes I'll just lie down on my bed and watch him on TikTok. And he's so, oh my God, he's so adorable.
He's so adorable. I love him.
Anyway.
Sorry, go ahead.
Just a fucking amazing artist.
Yeah, he's I love his music.
So fucking smart.
Yes.
Anyway. Okay. So go from Jack Parsons to Lil Nas X fan club. Anyway, but you know, I was listening to different podcasts, either talking about like the Satan shoes or talking about the Satanic Panic in the 70s and 80s, and like time and again, and I really respect journalists. Like that's like I'm not one, and it's really hard, and so I respect it. But time and again, people were like, but they aren't actually Satanists. But they weren't actually doing any satanic magic. But thank goodness. And I'm like, hey, the huge problem with this is that there are actually religious Satanists.
Yeah.
There's Luciferians. You also have traditional witchcraft that has like the man in black.
Yeah.
I'm trying to trying to make the balloons, but it's not working.
I know. Where'd they go? I know.
Yeah. So I'm like, screw it. Like, okay, we're gonna talk about like what the Satanic Panic in the 70s and 80s was really briefly. But then I'm like, no, we're gonna fucking talk about like religious Satanism because this is a meaningful practice to people. And like people like to talk about the Satanic Temple, which I think is super important, fascinating. That documentary is great. The book is great. But I'm like, but they're atheists, right?
Yeah.
Like, and there are people who worship Satan. And that's so like when I started thinking about that, I got uncomfortable in my gut.
Yeah.
And I realized I was raised atheist and I was like, oh, that's what it means to grow up in a culture
Mhm.
that's like a hegemony revolving around Christianity.
Yeah.
Like, we can't help it. There's
Mhm.
that little like, ooh,
Yes.
oh, is that going to be okay?
Yes.
I'm like, yeah, I'm going to make it okay. Also, hashtag manifesto.
Exactly. I know. It's really good. And I think, yeah, just like you, I try to use everything to make myself more knowledgeable about things so that I'm not coming at it as like, well, I hate when people say this is strange. I do think certain things are strange, obviously, but
Sure.
I'm not going to call a whole group of people strange because if everybody's happy and everyone's consenting, who am I to say that it's weird? Like, I don't know. If everybody's happy, I don't care. Have fun.
Yeah.
Pop off,
Yeah.
sis. You know?
Yeah, no, totally. I think that's really the thing is, if people are consenting, and one of the beautiful things about Thelema is this idea of following your true will.
Yeah.
Which doesn't mean do whatever the fuck you want,
Mhm.
which is what a lot of people think. Like, it means what is the thing that you want to do
Mhm.
with yourself and with this existence that you have.
Yeah.
There's no guarantees. Do that thing that's most meaningful to you. And like the hard part is even just figuring out what that is.
I know.
And that's cool. Yeah.
That
Anyway,
is cool. I love that.
yeah.
Oh, that's
Now we need the balloons.
I know. Where are the balloons now? Jesus Christ. I know. Jesus Christ, bring the balloons.
Riverside.
I know. The gods of Riverside, bring back the balloons, please. I know.
Ancestors of software, gifts.
Oh gosh. Oh, well, Heather, this has been such a good time. Thank you for being here. This has been so fun.
Oh, this was so super fun. Ashley, thank you so much for having me. And I am like totally gonna try to make one of those Puritan recipes now. I think this is gonna be a 2024 goal.
Yeah, why not? It sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
Parsley in a turkey, a young one. Make sure it's young.
A young
Yeah.
one. Yeah.
It's got to be young.
You don't want it scarred and traumatized by
No.
life experiences.
You don't want an elderly turkey.
No.
A crone turkey. Don't get a crone turkey.
I feel like that's me. That is me. She says as she grabs her neck.
I know.
Anyway.
It's fun. So, Heather, where can people find you and your podcast if they would want to listen to it? Because I bet everybody's like, "Oh, I want to listen to this podcast now." Yeah.
You can you just find it. It's called Magic in the United States. It's magicintheunitedstates.com. We have a Instagram, which I am terrible about maintaining other than when we have an episode going or a season going. I think it's like Magic US podcast. But if you go to magicintheunitedstates.com, you'll find it there. And there's links there to Spotify and Apple and wherever you get your podcasts. And we have 6 episodes out now covering everything from, oh gosh, I like so much stuff.
I know you had like a person who's, I don't know if they're from Korea or of Korean descent, who is doing shamanism, right? I remember that. Yeah, because that's in my downloads.
Yep.
Yeah. That's why I remember.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I gotta listen to this. Yes.
Yeah. That was Jennifer Kim and there's an episode on Hoodoo root work conjure. There's another one about Pennsylvania Dutch powwow brakarai. There's one about one of my favorites is the geekiest one. It's about like early bulletin board systems on the internet and like how pagans around the world found each other.
Oh, I love
and the very
that.
first,
Yeah.
I don't know. And the very first one has Reverend Aaron Davis, who teaches classes on hoodoo root work. He's also a santero. He's into spiritismo. He has an amazing life story and life practice. And Thorn Mooney, who's a Wiccan high priestess, is also in that. And which, like, you're like, what? That's different. And it's like, yeah, because that whole episode is talking about how do we change in our religions and our beliefs over the course of our lives? And like, here's 2 people who have very different stories, but like, there's also these similarities because they're doing these things that most people don't know what to make of.
Yeah.
Which is cool.
I love that. Yay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Everybody listen to Magic in the United States. It sounds, it's good. It's good. Everybody listen. So, thank you so much, Heather, for being here. I really appreciate it. Yeah, of course. And everybody, if you didn't know what you're listening to, it's Dine with the Divine. And we're on Instagram, Facebook, Threads, sometimes TikTok and YouTube. And if you don't mind, if you could give us a rating, we always prefer 5 stars, but if you want to give us whatever, just be honest. It's all good. I'll still love you anyway. You can find us anywhere you listen to your podcast, Apple Podcast, Spotify, whatever. If you have any questions, suggestions, comments, or anything, email me at dinewiththedivinepod@gmail.com. And if you want to follow me, Ashley, I'm Sankofa HS. That's SANKOFAHS in Sankofa Healing Sanctuary on Facebook and whatever other platforms. Okay, so thank you all for being here. I'll see all of you next week and have a great week. Till I see you again, goodbye.